Meeting to order. Ask the clerk to call roll, please.
Ron Kinsley,
Here.
Mark Helwig, Ed Peters,
Here.
Dale Olson, Brian Bissonette.
I don't think you hear you, Lynn.
They can hear you, but they can't respond.
Can Rebecca hear us?
Call their name again, please.
I can hear you.
Dale Olson, Brian Bissonette, Brian,
Open microphone.
Mhm.
Derek, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, the supervisors need to unmute themselves. If they can hear me, they gotta unmute themselves on their computer screen.
Mr. Bissonette?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Olson? Mr. Olson? Mr. Olson, can you hear us?
Well, we have a quorum.
We have 3 who responded out of 5.
So let the record indicate.
Was that Mr. Olson speaking?
Let the record indicate we have a quorum. Certification of compliance of open meeting laws.
The meeting has been noticed to the public and news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you. Number 4, meeting agenda is presented. We're going to use what we have. Number 5 is public comment.
My name is Cliff Korn. I'm a private hangar owner and representative of the Hayward Pilots and Hangar Owners Association. We agree that the county airport operation should strive for self-sustainability and raise revenue to that end. Private hangar owners and lessees have and will continue to pay their fair share. Airport services used by these private hangar lessees represents 10% or less of the total operations. The vast majority of the services are used by commercial, transient, jet, and turbine traffic. Most, if not all, of the airport improvements are done to support this traffic, to which federal and state funds pay for 90 to 100% of the cost, with the county's share being 10%, 5%, in some cases, depending on the grants, 0%. The average value of a single visit by one of these commercial operators exceeds $8,000 average. The county directly receives, on a regular basis, only the fuel flow rate of 12 cents a gallon if fuel is sold. The FBO makes a modest income for the services provided. Most other airports with such commercial traffic charge $100 to $300 landing use fees for each visit. To the transit commercial operators, this is a very small cost of doing business, and none seem to object. Sawyer County doesn't charge this much for fees. If the county would charge these fees, the net revenue direct to the county would likely be between $25,000 and $55,000 a year, based on previously reported operation numbers. This could well put the direct county costs of the airport operation in the black. It seems, to me anyway, that the county is digging for peanuts when the gold remains untouched. As something to think about. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment?
Linda Zilber and Dan Purcell.
On the Zoom?
Good evening, committee members. Linda Zilmer, Edgewater property owner. I have two comments tonight. They pertain to the ATV UTV route agenda item and then a request for a future agenda item. I believe I sent members of the committee, the highway commissioner and the county administrator 2 emails regarding Washburn County's ordinance, and then a follow-up about coordinating county trails with road routes based on permits or funding sought for trails in the forestry committee. But my concern with tonight's agenda, which I believe is item 8C under the highway commissioner, I do not feel that the way that is listed is sufficient enough to adequately inform the public as to the action you would be taking tonight. As I understand from my open records request of March 30th, asking about the county's ordinances and ATV routes, that tonight the committee is going to be considering adding 2 new routes. So really the action for that you would be considering tonight is not just the list, it would be considering 2 new routes, and people who might be impacted would not know that's what you're doing. Further, when I talked about these potential new routes with the highway commissioner a couple of weeks ago and explaining I had the list, you can't tell from looking at the list what are the new ones and what were the ones that were previously approved. So I don't know what action the committee would want to take regarding that agenda item tonight. My email request to the committee was to not approve any new routes until there was a review of the existing policy and development of new policies and an enforceable ordinance for road routes. So again, originally my concern was having adequate policy, ordinance, and plans in place, but now I also have the additional concern of how this has been noticed. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you say you had a second one?
No, they were tied together in that I'm hoping a future agenda item, the county will develop policy and an ordinance, and I provided Washburn counties as an example. I know you can't do anything about that tonight because there was not sufficient time, but then the second thing is when it comes to your actual list, I'm asking that you either take no action because it was not properly or sufficiently noticed, or not approve any new routes until you have policy and an ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan, see what he says.
Dan Marcel.
We have a bad connection there, if that's Dan talking. Cannot hear you.
Dan, try again, please.
Sign out and sign back in.
Oh, it's not coming through legibly, Dan. Can you try to log out and log back in?
Mr. Chairman,
Folks, I got Dan Marcel. Dan Marcel is going to try to log back in. I got him on the phone.
Thank you. Can we hear Dale Wilson now? I see you had his name up there. Mr. Olson, can we hear your voice?
you should be able to now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now we can. Thank you.
I am not good with technology.
All right. It's fun to make sure we had the connection. Well, earlier I got an email from yesterday from Mr. Dan Lascelles. He asked me if he could make public comment, and I understood him to say he wants to make public comment during the hangar section. And I told him that would be okay. So I think we'll move forward and we'll see if he can get on when we get to the hangar section again. So we'll move forward. Next item is number 6, Public Works Committee meeting of the March meeting. Is there anything that you see incorrect, or can we accept them as presented?
I'll move to accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Peters, second by Mr. Olson to approve as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 7, Sawyer County Airport report. Mr. Leslie has put together a report for us. Does anybody have any questions on the report for him? Mr. Leslie, anything stand out you want to share with us?
Can you hear me okay, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
One thing that came in, a little bit of good news with bad news too. The good news is you see that our engineering estimates for our project came in low. Savings to Sawyer County is $11,700 some versus what we had budgeted for. So that's good news. We did have an incident right at the end of the month, and I've been working with Tom Hoff quite a bit. I had an incident out on the ramp where there was a minor accident out there, and it's been kind of brought up as a talking point as to how we report those things and what safety measures are in place out at the airport to prevent things from happening. A piece of equipment was backed up into a vehicle. So it's been kind of a learning process for me, especially in working with Tom, trying to figure out the first steps and processes we're going to take to prevent it from happening again. As well, I think that's kind of why Tom's there. One thing that happened during the month that was not in my report.
Thank you. Any other questions on Mr. Leslie's report?
Mr. Chairman, did the members of the committee get sent the link to that article that was published about the airport in that Business View magazine? I know I had sent it to Mr. Schuman and yourself.
I don't know if the other committee's members got that. You want to talk a little bit about it?
Well, it was essentially, for lack of a better word, is a puff piece that was written in a prominent magazine that was about our airport. The things that we've done in the recent history, the things that we have planned in the future, talked a little bit about me and my operations, and it was a prominent magazine that gets a lot of attraction. They've got something like 800,000 subscribers to the magazine. So it's always nice when some good PR comes in on the airport side of things. It seems like it's all too often where it's not good PR. So I'd for sure like to point that out, and it's a good read. It kind of gives some supervisors, especially if they don't have a really good history of the airport, to take a look at it and read some good things that are happening at the airport.
Mr. Howe.
Yeah, piggybacking on what Derek just mentioned, I do have that link in my administrator's report on the admin committee, but I'll find the link and send it back to this committee as well. As Derek said, it's a business publication that goes out to over 800,000 subscribers to that magazine, highlighting Sawyer County Airport and the services provided there. It also provided an opportunity for Hayward Lakes to place their ad next to the article, so that people are interested in coming into the airport can contact Hayward Lakes and get set up with accommodations or other fun things to do in Sawyer County. So thank you, Derek, for working with the Chamber and the Visitors Bureau and putting that together.
Just a minute there. Maybe that should go out to all the county board members, please. Thank you. Moving on to letter B, airport boundary survey property easement, discussion and possible action.
Derek, do you want to talk about those?
Well, I got emails and I had Don Hamlin in the building here this morning, meeting with me. The town of Hayward has reviewed all of these documents. The town of Hayward board approved everything at their town board meeting last night. Basically, this is just a cleanup. Part of the boundary survey that we hired out an engineer for to basically shore up our boundaries and all the legal documents pertaining to the airport. It's a pretty common thing after you've undergone recent expansion. So it basically looks at every parcel of land, and these easements that you see here, we did relocate a couple sections of road. So I believe that Rebecca's reviewed them. Dan Pluger from the Sawyer County Surveyor's Office has reviewed them extensively. And I think that everything's in Sawyer County's best interest. A lot of this stuff is, it's required by the Wisconsin Bureau of Aeronautics for us to take these steps to make sure that the airport in Sawyer County has, good standing title, and that everything is done the appropriate way and on the up and up pertaining to the boundaries that include the airport. So don't take my word for it. Tom could speak to that as well. I think for Rebecca that these documents are in the county's best interest to sign.
Agreed.
I have not reviewed these documents.
Thank you. Questions, concerns from the committee?
I don't see any. You have any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm just wondering, I know it's a boundary survey, but the airport does have a survey that is 3D. because there was a survey for elevations also. Is that part of this?
Mr. Hoff?
Not necessarily. I mean, the 3D stuff that's on the GIS system is separate from this. This was a survey that was required because of the rerouting of Airport Road a while back. And so this is a cleanup when they did the airport survey, just to correct some of the changes that occurred when that was rerouted.
Sure, but in the zoning office, there are maps allowing neighboring properties and airport property for elevations, the maximum height things can reach nearby the airport. And I didn't know if this would affect that.
I don't believe it does at this time. This is just roads themselves. I know an example, the town of Radisson didn't own underneath one road and we had to clean that up one time. This is the same thing. We're just cleaning up the roads to get the proper easements on both these roads.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I put one more point in about next month's meeting?
Yes.
There's going to be one more thing with this that's not included tonight, and that's a quit claim deed that the town of Hayward approved tonight, but we were not able to get in on the agenda with open meeting laws and requirements. So there's going to be one more document on the agenda for next month as well. And essentially, it's a quit claim deed for the land where the old road used to be, where the town of Hayward essentially signs off that road back to Sawyer County. So we're not completely, this isn't the total end of it, but it's pretty close.
Thank you. I'll make a motion that number 1, Sawyer County Airport Navigating Lane easement combined final of 012421. I'll make a motion to approve that.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
In discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Just a minute, just a minute. So there's a motion on the floor. It's seconded by Mr. Peters. Go ahead, Mr. Schuman.
In discussion, is it concerning that our court counsel has not had time to review these? Or should it be contingent on council reviewing and approving these?
We have checked them out with our county surveyor, so we feel they're good. Okay. Any further discussion? I'm going to ask the question. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 2, Sawyer County Airport Road easement combined final 012621. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Peters. There's a motion and a second by Mr. Peters to approve number 2, Sawyer County Airport Road easement combined. Discussion? Hearing none. I'll ask the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Letter C, Hayward Aviation request direct signs of new hangars, discussion and possible action. We have hangar sign number 1 and hangar sign number 2. Derek, anything you want to add?
It's part of the contracts that we're not supposed to erect signs without approval. Mr. Hoff's recommended that it come to committee for review. Beyond that, just kind of the mindset of kind of working together with the county. We're at a 15% revenue share for all the revenue that we're generating from this new hangar facility. And I think that putting signs up and labeling it as ours and making folks awareness that it's there and it's a service that we provide would go a long ways towards helping us fill the space and realize the revenue that we are hoping for.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion or?
So we need a motion to approve the signs?
Yes.
Yeah, for the FBO contract, it does require county approval, so
Okay.
bring it to the committee. It doesn't necessarily have to go to the board, but I think the committee should be aware and approve the signage.
I'll make a motion to approve the new signs for the hangars.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Peters to approve the signs, second by Mr. Olson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Letter D, hangar lease update, discussion and possible action. This is just a template of how to set these up. Now, when you go through here, we have to set the rate per square foot and what do we call it, like a signing,
The one-time assessment.
one-time assessment. And then you get down to number 29 and 30, where it goes or 31, 32, and 33. That has to be thoughts, comments?
Yeah, just a couple other comments on this. This hangar ground lease agreement was developed based off of the Bureau of Aeronautics template. It's very similar to the one done for the Hayward Aviation lease as well. We had some discussions in prior months about concerns from stakeholders, tried to develop those within here. Obviously, we were talking about these hangar leases. There were comments made about other things and other revenue sources. That's not part of what this lease agreement is, and we've done work in that area already, increasing some other revenue in other areas. So this is strictly pertaining to the new ground leases after leases have expired for those hangar owners that have current leases. As that 20-year plus 10-year option expires, they need to enter into a new lease agreement. And so this is the format that would be used to initiate those new hangar leases. So as Mr. Board Chair Kinsley mentioned, that there are a few highlighted areas that concern policy issues that this committee has discussed and made an action on before. But as you review it in the context of the complete agreement, you could certainly change what you had agreed upon before or insert it into the shaded areas here. So I draw your attention to the term and extension on line 2. The term of the lease shall be for a period of so many years and would have an additional successive how many year period under the same terms and conditions. So the last time the committee took action, it was a 10-year lease plus 10 additional years for 20-year total. Going down to...
Let's stop there.
Okay, yeah.
Please. So let's talk about that a little bit. I know that before we talked about 10 years and 10 years, it was brought to my attention that sometimes people are going to the bank and it's hard to go with a total of 20 years. So some people talk to me about going 30 years. I don't have a problem going 30 years. What's the comments from the other committee members?
The existing leases are 20 plus 10.
I guess if everyone else, or if there's an agreement on that, I have no problem going with a 20-year plus 10.
Okay. Mr. Bissonette?
I can agree with that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
I don't disagree with it. I'm going to kind of defer from everything because I made the motions last time and it was soundly shot down at county board. So I will go with consensus of the group.
Thank you. Here's a question. Should we put in numbers as we go down through this? Is that acceptable?
Well, I think you've got kind of a consensus there. Why don't we just kind of talk about the other ones, because then we can do it all in one motion.
Just looking for ideas.
Yep. You can do it as you may, just a suggestion. Moving into the rent under number 4C, well, actually 4A, the rent per square foot. The original leases had rent of 10 cents per square foot, and there was somewhat of an escalator in there. We did have some discussion at the last committee, one of the last committee meetings, where this committee recommended 15 cents per square foot. There was subsequent discussion about that. We did provide data to you from Bureau of Aeronautics on all of the airports in Wisconsin for your review. You had requested the raw data, so that was provided to you. You can certainly make other suggestions. As it stands currently, you had suggested 15 cents per square foot. We did some analysis with utilizing the same language that we have in the Hayward Aviation hangar lease agreement as far as an escalator clause, using the rate of inflation for the CPI on an annual basis. If we had done that since 1990, the rate in 2020 would actually be 20 cents. You know, if it was good at 10 cents in 1990, it would be 20 cents in 2020. Not to say that that's what you need to set it at. It's just saying that inflation has eroded our ability to keep up with the costs. Obviously, our expenses at the airport have risen in conjunction with the inflation rate. And so that's you know, why the county is subsidizing the airport with tax dollars because we haven't been able to keep up with the expenses and the inflation over time. So another decision point for you, and I'll pause and let you discuss that if you have any further comments.
Mr. Chairman, this is Derek Leslie. I just wanted to touch base with Dan Marcel. I know he's had his hand up. I think this is his biggest talking point that he wanted to chime in on, his thoughts on the matter. I'm not sure where you're at in that process.
I thought we'd get through the document before we vote. I told him I would let him speak. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I guess I did a little bit of research in terms of inflation rates. And yes, since 1990, the average inflation rate per year over that time period comes out to about 2.3%, which would yield the value that Mr. Hoff just quoted of about 20 cents. I would say going to approximately 1% increase, 1.5% increase per year, that brings it to 15 cents. I think splitting the difference between the expense to the hangar owners or the hangar lessees, excuse me, and the taxpayers of the county of Sawyer would be a good place to at least start the discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
I didn't have my hand raised, Mr. Chairman, but you know, I have thought on this, just that you know, some of these are pay to play. If we are to believe, you know, our speaker who talked to us earlier, then we have other options of getting money to make this solvent. At this point, I think rate of inflation is at minimum the best. Thank you.
Mr. Bissonnette? We'll move forward. Thank you.
Okay, so that was 4A. 4B has to do with the rent adjustment. That's the portion talking about the escalator and the price index that would be used. That makes it consistent with the same index that we use for other purposes, especially the Hayward Aviation lease, but other areas in the county where we use an index for inflation. This would be an annual basis or an annual adjustment based on that CPI, urban consumers in the Midwest. The other point, number C, the one-time assessment. Lessee shall pay a one-time assessment of, it's currently $750. The suggestion at the last committee was $1,000 payable to the lessor upon lessee's execution of this lease. So it's currently upon committee recommendation to be $1,000. There was some discussion, and maybe you want to have a discussion about when that $1,000 applies. Certainly at the beginning of a new lease would be a good time to apply that one-time assessment. Further discussion about whether you would want to charge that if there's a change of ownership within the term of a lease. For instance, if somebody sold a hangar in year 15, would the $1,000 apply, or would it only apply at the expiration of a lease and a new lease negotiated? So I'll pause again for your discussion.
Well, using the same analysis that I did, the $1,000 comes out to approximately a 1% increase, and I think that that's a less than half of the inflation rate. And I think everything else has gone up that I've noticed in the last 10 years, if not 30 years. But that would be to leave it at $1,000, I think is a good place to start for the discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Bissonette?
I can agree to that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Olson? We'll move on then to next one would be what, 30?
Yeah, so then we get into another choice, a policy choice for the committee as we get to
I agree with Mr. Peters. I think we're fine there. It's a nice round number.
Mr. Olson, you really broke up.
But I think it should.
Try again, Mr. Olson. You were really broke up. We couldn't make out. All right, Mr. Olson, we'll try again in a little bit. We're going to move forward to number 29 and 30.
Okay, with regard to line 29 and 30, this has to do with a lease transfer if one should occur. Line 29 having to do with the title to the building, and line number 30, the lease transfer. So the lessee may not assign or transfer this lease or any interest contained herein without the consent of the lessor, which consent shall not be unreasonably withheld. So that's one option for the language when the lease transfers. The other option are lines 31, 32, and 33, which more explicitly lines out the obligations of that assignment and when it can occur, and more specific language in the right of first refusal, the first right of refusal for the county if it wanted to purchase that lease outright instead. So line 31, 32, 33, if you want that option, or lines 29 or 30. So it gives you a little bit different option as far as how those leases transfer.
Mr. Peters, your comment on
Yeah. Is there a preferable?
in the past, the county has had the right to the first refusal,
Okay,
so it'd be the 31, 32, 33.
Which wouldn't necessarily go away with lines 29 and 30, but it's more explicitly written out. And perhaps Rebecca could outline the highlights of one versus the other more eloquently than I did.
Rebecca?
Sure. In sections 29 and 30, those are derived from the WISDOT BOA sample lease, which we we're encouraged to model off of, and which is certainly fine to do. Options in section 31, 32, and then 33 are what the county has utilized in its previous leases, including the most recent Hayward Aviation LLC hangar lease. Now, I understand that lease is for commercial uses, whereas we're talking about a hangar lease for individual uses, but that point is really irrelevant when it comes to these particular sections. With respect to the right of first refusal, should you go with sections 29 and 30, that right of first refusal doesn't technically go away, and here's why. The county has to approve any assignment or transfer of title under the sections 29 and 30, if that's the choice. So in the process of reviewing and approving that transfer, the county could refuse to approve it if it has legitimate, valid reasons in its, within its statutory authority to do so. One of which may be it wants to purchase that area itself. So it effectively is a right of first refusal in those first two sections without explicitly stating so. The other point is, keep in mind that the governmental entity that owns the airport is always encouraged to have the most control over that airport because of public safety reasons and national security reasons. So that's another reason why the right of first refusal is in the existing leases, and that concept is rolled into the more simplified versions that you see at 29 and 30.
Thank you. We're going to go back to Mr. Olson, see if we can make the connection, please.
All right. Did you hear me last time, Mr. Chairman?
No, we did not. So go ahead, please.
All right. I acquiesce to
Mr. Olson, you started out real well and then it goes away. Mr. Olson? You start out real well, it goes away.
I've gotten on this. I think it's getting I can't do any better.
Now we can hear you right there. Maybe it's the distance, maybe. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I will stand above my bathroom sink. I think I can hear you guys. I understand Ms. Roker's comments. I'm fine with it. I don't think we are a commercial airport, regardless of what we heard. We're not a commercial airport. I have a hard time believing some of the numbers I heard today. So I think we're in the ballpark. I understand that we should, I think track so.
Mr. Olson, I'm going to kind of repeat what you said, I think. You heard Ms. Roker's And overall, you think we're in the ballpark?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yep, we are.
Can you hear okay? You want to come up here? That'd be helpful. We have the chair there. Thank you. Mr. Bissonnette, any comment?
Yes, I'm here, but you fade in and out too.
Okay. You have comments that you want to share, please?
Just give me a minute to think about this.
Yes.
I've been looking at it. So what would be, I mean, does anybody have an opinion on which option would be better, 29, 30, or
31, 32, or 33?
31, 32? I mean, I can see both ways.
My thought is it's more cleaner with 31, 32, 33. That way, in my opinion, people can see right away that the county has first option. 29 and 30, in my opinion, you gotta go looking for it. And I like it to be clean. I want the public to know that this is out there. My thoughts. Mr. Huff.
Okay, so if I may summarize, then obviously there's a lot of language within the lease. Again, it's modeled after the BOA to be consistent with that. The decision points for the committee, the rate, 15 cents or something other than that. The term, a 10-year plus 10-year or a 20-year plus 10-year to get to 30. The $1,000 assessment initiation. Only on the initiation of a new lease or anytime there's a lease transfer. And then the language 29, 30 or 31, 32, 33. So if you want to walk through each one of those, and then we can insert those in there, and then you could adopt the template with those inserted, that would go to the board.
I have to give Mr. Dan so a chance to speak. I told him I would let him speak before we.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I hope that still holds true. Thank you for letting me join the discussion. And I found the discussion by the committee very helpful. Administrator Hoff made a very good point on emphasizing that the county is looking for ways to subsidize the operation of the airport. I'll just piggyback on to what Mr. Korn said in the public comment section about there are other areas of revenue that will yield far more funding to support the airport than what we're spending a huge amount of time discussing relative to these hangar leases. Now let me go on and just specifically identify some concerns I have with the hangar draft template. It's obvious this was lifted as has been acknowledged right from the BOA or from perhaps a Rusk County lease template that somebody on the committee or perhaps Rebecca received a copy of. I know I had distributed that to some members. First of all, my comment about adjusting the lease rate every year puts the burden on the county. We have enough trouble communicating with the county as witnessed by what I deem to be the failure of the county to work with us at the end of our 20-year period of leases to move into the 10-year extension. So anything we can do to lighten the county's burden in administrating these leases, I think is important. Using the Bureau of Labor Statistic inflation calculator is a simple tool that anybody can use and calculate the inflation for whatever period of time you choose to do. Okay. The next point I want to make is the $1,000 fee that's been discussed in the meeting. I think Administrator Hoff raised the question that I have. I think there needs to be more definition of when that $1,000 fee applies. Does it apply, as Mr. Hoff asked, upon a transfer of lease? Does it apply if my lease is fully expired and I've asked to start a new lease? There are a lot of questions that remain unanswered in the language as it's currently written. The couple of hangars, at least one hangar that I'm aware of, perhaps a second one, currently have living quarters associated with it. I believe 9B in the draft says those aren't allowed, so you guys have to figure out how to deal with that in a lease. Secondly, below 9H, I don't think it's affiliated with any particular named paragraph. There's a statement about only allowing fuel to be stored in the hangar that's in an aircraft. Previously, either your committee or the predecessor committee had made agreements with several hangar owners to store larger amounts of fuel stored appropriately in a container in the hangar. So that needs to be addressed. And there's number 16, talks about limitation of storing aircraft, temporarily storing aircraft. I mean, come on. We've gotten on for 30 years without this fine print, and you're just undertaking more administrative responsibilities by including something like that. I can't understand why that's in there, other than it was lifted from either the BOA template or some other airport's lease. And finally, the reference is made to a personal guarantee. I've not seen that. I know it's listed as an exhibit or an attachment, but I'd like to understand, as I'm sure all other hangar owners would, what that personal guarantee says. Thank you for your consideration, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Number 16, we have to fill in that one.
Yes.
What should we fill in that as administrator recommend?
Rebecca, do you have comments related to any of the items brought up by Mr. Michelle or any of the other language in the lease? Obviously, we were instructed to use the BOA as a template. So to say that it's lifted, it wasn't lifted, it was the guidance that we used. Other than that, please respond to those that you can.
Sure, be happy to. With respect to the $1,000 initial payment, certainly we can add clarification to that section. If the committee feels that the fee should be imposed every time there is a lease transfer. But the way that it reads right now is that the fee is paid one time when the lease is executed. So that language, in my opinion, is not ambiguous or somehow implies that it has to be paid upon a subsequent transfer. Again, if that's the way the county would like to have memorialized that policy decision, you can certainly amend that language, but I don't think it's ambiguous at this time. With respect to section B, or I'm sorry, 9B, the living quarters, no, certainly that is something that the county will have to address and work with the airport manager on how to tackle those issues, and if it is occurring now, but that provision is in your existing leases. The one note that Mr. Marcel made, and I didn't quite catch the provision or which section it was, but I believe it was with respect to the exclusive use of the hangar for
Yes.
hangar purposes. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you recall if that's what Mr. Marcel's last comment was, or if he could verify. I wanted to touch on that one also.
I believe that's what his comments were.
Okay. There has been concern articulated from the airport manager that there's been violations of the existing lease provisions, that the hangars be used for aircraft storage, and stated another way that currently the hangars, or some hangars, are not being used for aircraft storage. Perhaps they're used for boat storage or other property storage. And so the concern that a hangar is not being used for aircraft storage is a concern that has been raised multiple times to this committee, and was not included in this lease draft as a means to micromanage the use of the hangars. And also there is a connection to what FAA regulations are, and other state and federal standards, that these hangars indeed be used for aeronautical purposes and for aircraft. So I just want the committee and Mr. Marcel to understand that the inclusion of that point, number one, was based on prior discussion before this committee, but also based on legal standards, and not based on some sort of attempt to micromanage what the hangar lessees are able to do in those hangars.
Thank you.
Finally, I'm sorry, sir. With respect to the personal guarantee, the personal guarantee is a very standard request in any sort of lease agreement when you have an entity that is the lessee. So let's say you have the lessee that signs or that enters into the lease is ABC LLC. Whoever is the individual, we'll say responsible for ABC LLC, will sign a personal guarantee to ensure that there is a responsible party for lessee's obligations. That is a very typical provision you will see in any sort of really commercial or residential lease. If you're looking for an example, the ones that were used for Hayward Aviation, those are very standardized, typical personal guarantees. And assuming the facts and circumstances are the same for other entities, I would recommend that the county can use those same version of personal guarantees for lease agreements in the future that were used for Hayward Aviation.
Number 16, Rebecca.
Number 16. Okay, well, the blank there is, it's a policy decision for the committee. And it goes back to the point that I made, that there have been some concerns raised about not storing aircraft over a long period of time. So it's really up to the committee of how long of a period you want to set. From FAA's standpoint, and Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that FAA gives a certain time frame that you have to utilize the space for aircraft storage. Derek, I don't know if you want to add on to that. You're muted, Derek.
Sorry, I muted myself because I was coughing. If you look at 9C, the permitted uses of these hangars in the leases, I think that's where some of this confusion or question marks may be coming from. It says that the hangar owner is supposed to use the hangar, and it's for the purpose of storing their aircraft or aircraft owned by their immediate family or subsidiaries or employees. You come down to what we're looking at, number 16, and occupants of the building, and there's just kind of a question mark there because, you know, whether it's friends or coworkers or, you know, hey, I came to see you for the weekend. I think that's where, you know, some of the confusion is between 9C and 16 and what the permitted uses are for these buildings. So an occupant of the building, it's not supposed to be anybody other than the lessee without consent of the lessor. Well, if there's an occupant of the building other than the lessee, then realistically, that's where the minimum standards and procedures come into play, where the hangar owner is most likely generating revenue off of or offsetting expenses on having airplanes in their hangar that aren't theirs. Does that make sense?
Yes. So we should probably put a time frame in there, or should it be no time frame?
Well, and then for me as airport manager, trying to kind of figure out how to keep track of these occupants and who's in there, and looking back to the hangar leases, you know, it's for me to keep tabs of who's going in and out of hangars, because I'm the person who's supposed to be, you know, keeping a tabs on things and enforcing these contracts. When I look at 16, I just assume maybe 16 not be in there, period, you know, and just fall back on 9C on what the permitted uses are and who's supposed to be in the hangar and who isn't.
That's a good way to look at it. Thank you.
From a legal standpoint, that's a fine option as well, because the minimum standards ordinance is going to kick in and be effective regardless. So you don't lose anything from a legal standpoint by removing 16.
Thank you. All right, for the committee, anything else you want to discuss? If not, maybe we could fill in the blanks, but we should have a motion to fill in the blanks.
I move that we fill in the blanks.
Okay. What blank are we going to put in for the time frame? How long a lease?
Thought our discussion was 20 years or 30-year lease, with 20-year lease with a 10-year renewal.
Thank you. Going down. Rent per square foot. What do we want to put in there?
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and say 15 cents per square foot per year.
Okay. A one-time assessment.
I will say $1,000.
Thank you. Question. And this is the question that has been asked, so let's clarify it, please. Is it a new lease, the 20-year with 10-year extension? Is that where the $1,000 comes in? And does it come in any other place? I think that's the only place it's going to come in. My thought.
I would agree.
Going down.
Question?
Yes.
So Rebecca, is the language in C then, is that stating the one time, the execution of the lease? Is that what that means?
Yes, upon execution of this lease, that is when the one-time assessment is due.
Thank you.
So if asked the question of would this be triggered upon an assignment, I would say no, because even though you may have an assignment of the lease, it's not execution of this lease.
Thank you.
Okay. Going down. What do we do with 16? Leave it or strike it?
Let's just strike it. Strike it and renumber the subsequent line,
Okay.
paragraphs.
Okay, and how about down at 2930 or 30
think we've discussed it, and I think going with 31, 32, 33 is the most clear articulation of what we want.
So that's a motion by Mr. Peters. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Peters and a second by Mr. Bissonnette. Now, the chair is supposed to repeat the motion. So maybe I'll ask Lynn to read them back in to make sure that we have them correctly. If that's acceptable.
Mr. Peters moved to make the time frame a 20-year lease with a 10-year renewal. The rent set at 15 cents per square foot per year, with a one-time assessment of $1,000 at the execution of this lease, and to strike number 16 and renumber subsequent paragraphs, and chose item 31 through 33 to clearly articulate.
Thank you. Any further discussion of the motion?
Just to clarify, you could say strike 29 and 30 to be consistent with the way you worded 16. And then 30.
Yes.
Yep.
Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Bissonnette, Mr. Strike 29 and 30?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Olson, we're voting. All in favor?
Now I got the unmute button. Aye.
I apologize, Mr. Olson. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we'll get through it. And opposed, being none, motion carried unanimously. Thank you. And thank everybody. You know, there's a lot of work put into this, and a lot of people have their opinions, and that's okay, because that's what it takes of who we are today. Everybody has to have their chance to speak, to see where they're at. Now, that motion is forwarded to the full county board for the template. The county board votes on the template, and then it'll come back to the hangars, individual hangars, to follow later. Okay, I want to thank everybody for all the time you spent on that, but it's very important time. Hearing nothing else, we're going to move on to number 8, Highway Commission report. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Does anyone have any questions on the report?
Anything stand out you want to share with us?
Just that the road bans are going on. Are we going to be removed Monday, noon, 19th? Nothing further on that.
Thank you. The training. Where's that training at? Annual mine training.
That'll be up in our training room, break room at the highway department.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Gary on the commission's report? Thank you. We'll move forward. The next item is letter B, highway bid tabulation result, asphalt, centerline, roadways.
Okay. County was awarded that multimodal local supplement project. And one of the requirements is that I have to have official award minutes from the committee of jurisdiction. So I guess what I'm looking for is a motion to accept the bid of Monarch Paving for the hot mix asphalt type MT at a price of $51.50 a ton for the MLS project on County Road B.
Make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. There's a motion by Mr. Olson.
I'll second.
A second by Mr. Peters. Gary, help me out. With accepting the Monarch bid for what you say?
Hot mix asphalt type MT.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, that's all we have to do on the bid results.
Thank you. Letter C, advise ATV, UTV route list.
Okay.
Current list, maybe give a little update.
When Don was in signing, doing the renewals for February, after February meeting, it was noted, he noted that I had omitted 3 routes that we had approved in October of 2020. So I think it's proper that the committee makes a motion to also renew those 3 routes. And I can tell you what they are, Lynn. They're County Road M. They're actually on the list. They're actually on the list. But they weren't included in their list that was distributed to you guys at the meeting. Okay, so this list that Lynn has on here as an agenda item includes County Road M from Beeback Road, County Road W, County Road S from Moose Lake Road to 77, County Road B from Fish Trap to State Highway 7.
And just to clarify, every February we review all of them.
Correct.
And this was just have to be overlooked.
This is just an oversight. We had approved them in October. They weren't in my list that I had because they were new, fairly new routes. Just a matter of months old, so.
Mr. Geddart,
Yes,
are you sure ATVs will be able to handle County Road S? They may break a frame.
that's actually more suited for ATV, UTV than cars. Yes, Lynn?
The third one that was,
Oh, County
Yeah.
Road B from Fish Trap Road to State Highway 7.
I still do have a question on GG. Because the town of Draper has an ordinance, has passed an ordinance that goes all the way to the county line with Ashland County.
We haven't approved that.
Okay,
Maybe correspond to the town together.
yes.
Wishes of the committee?
Gary, I have a question. On these county roads, and I get that they're county roads, but when you guys are gonna name a stretch of county road, do you contact Nita on that? To inform her?
No, I don't think we do. No, I don't.
Okay.
It's something I can do in the future. I just have never thought about it. We weren't going off right away or anything. We're actually right on the roadway, but
Yeah, no, I get that, but we'll put it this way, the more communication we have between the county and the tribe is, we'll put it this way, it's a lot better to have that communication prior.
Yes, good point.
yeah, very good point.
Mr. Gebhardt will make sure he contacts them.
Mr. Chair-
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, would you allow one more public comment?
yes.
It's a question because there's so many controversies over, opening or not opening. One thing I mentioned to Gary was to include on this list the town or the municipality it goes through. My understanding of the resolution that was passed in 2018 is that the approval of the municipality, or in the LCO case of, going through there, that needed to be attained before approval of the road route. So my question was going to be, were all of the items that you're acting on tonight, did they receive the approval of the town that they go through? And now I also question that if you're not notifying LCO, then you weren't able to get their approval. Thank you.
Can I say something? Okay.
You don't have. Committee have any more comments? If not, I entertain a motion.
I move to approve the ATV, UTV routes as presented.
I will second.
Motion by Mr. Peters, second by Mr. Bissonnette to approve the 3 routes, so they're all coinciding with February's renewal date. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Letter D, Highway Department overtime. Anything stand out?
No, there's nothing really important on here. So month of March is way down. We were out a couple of times in April, believe it or not. We were actually out on bridge decks this morning, so only on state highways. And we're gonna have some scheduled overtime on the state when we start our mastic sealing, which is in our crack sealing. We're gonna work the crew up to 4 o'clock and then have them return to the shops. It's just more efficient, but that'll all be billed onto the state of Wisconsin. It won't be, there'll be no impact to Sawyer County.
And the hours that the president working is?
6 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Thank you. Any comments, thoughts from Mr. Gebhardt? Hearing none, thank you. Moving on to number 9. Thank you for your patience. Anybody have any questions on this maintenance report? Anything you want to share with us?
Probably about the only thing on there, just to give you a little bit of an update. We did mention in there that we did finish our portion of the dispatch center. And that was part of the capital improvement plan for 2021. Once contractors and everybody got going on that, and there were a lot of change orders that kind of came into play, and so the cost of that project had went substantially north of where what we had anticipated. But then we got a little we altered the water heater plan just a little bit, our approach to that, so we were able to bring the water heaters in ourselves. Still have the outside contractor do the install. We helped with that, but we were able to save $6,700 off of the cost of the water heater project. So that took care of the overages on the dispatch center. So for the sheriff's department, kind of came in on. They're natural gas, 100-gallon modulating water heaters. There's 2 of them that serve the 2006 portion of the jail.
The heating?
No, that's just for the hot water supply for inmates. So for all the cell blocks, and the original ones were installed in 2006. They were starting to have not so much, well, mechanical issues that were starting to come up, but that wasn't the problem. But they'd started to rust through on the tanks. So yeah, so they were past their life expectancy, and so we were able to go in and get those 2 replaced. So
thank you. Any other questions from Ms. Baker?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Hagberg, is the ability for you guys to do that, is part of that Noel Penning? I know he has several licensures when it comes to HVAC and plumbing and all that kind of stuff. You guys can kind of do this stuff internally, can't you? I mean, that's been a huge thing that's saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars.
we have 4 maintenance staff are actually Noel's got the most experience in HVAC, but yeah, we've got 4 staff members that are EPA certified, so we do all of our own refrigeration and air conditioning and HVAC. So, but the water heaters, we collaborated with Rasmussen's on that because of just because of the size of it, and trying to, each one of these water heaters was 900 pounds, so it was a little bit of a process. But yeah, yeah, Noel's a great guy, very, very helpful.
Thank you. Anything else? Not, we'll move on to number 10. Courtroom remodel update.
I'll give you a quick update on where we are at with the courthouse remodeling situation to add the second courtroom. There is a request for proposal out on the street to select the construction manager at risk for that project. We've been working with John Kane from Venture Architects in developing the plans as we've gone along, and they were instrumental in helping to develop that RFP that we have sent out to several contractors and are awaiting their responses to that RFP. This week we had a call of which there were 18 individuals on, which maybe 5 or 6 different companies to ask questions, just to give them an overview of the project, allow them to ask questions. We've received a couple of questions and we will respond to those by this Friday. And then their RFP proposals back to us are due on April 22nd. So we would be reviewing those on probably May 6th or May 7th, or probably both of those days. What will be on the county board agenda is the review committee. The board chair will be, as was discussed at the last county board meeting, the conceptual idea of creating a committee to review those contracts and kind of follow it as it goes along. So the county board chair will be proposing that committee be made up of the public works chair, the finance chair, the public safety chair, the county board chair, and the county administrator would be the 5 individuals. That's a cross section of those committees that will be involved in this project throughout. I think it's a good way to keep those committee chairs informed in case there's opportunities for them to bring something up to their respective committees related to that project, either on the public safety side, public works side, or the finance side. The project, of course, will run mainly through public works, as it is a building project under the jurisdiction of this committee. So that ad hoc committee would essentially report to public works if it is so approved at the county board next week. There were some soil borings done. That work was done, I believe, last week. That's one of the first steps in the project, as well as a survey. They received one proposal, which was a very high price for the surveying work that needs to be done. It's surveying that our surveyor cannot do for particular reasons, which I'm not aware of, not being a surveyor, but Mr. Plover tells me that it's above their scope. But so Venture Architect is trying to contact other surveyors to see if we can get a more reasonable proposal for that. On the public safety side, the judge, the sheriff, the clerk of court, the administrator, Chris Channing, court administrator, toured a couple of other court facilities, one in Barron County on March 25th, one in Bayfield County on March 26th, and they're going to the Green Lake County Courthouse in a future date here to be scheduled. What those tours enable them to do is just to see the layout of the judge's bench, the witness stand, the jury boxes, just to get a feel for the flow of traffic on how other courts have been designed to ensure that we get the most efficient court system, because this is our one shot to kind of redo both of those courtrooms to get the layout to work into the future here. So that's kind of the update as we know it right now. In addition to that, we've got, I passed out some information on hand here. Mike, if you want to bring that up on the screen. I did email it to the committee members who are online, but Mr. Colson will bring up that Word document for the Vets Services Building. I had Mr. Hagberg, I know he's had some concerns about the Veteran Service Building. That was the building that is across the street from us, in between us and the jail. And I'll let Mr. Hagberg kind of go over some of the concerns that he has, but I think this is an opportunity for us to look at it in the light of, are we going to try and fix the things that are wrong with the vets building to keep that alive? Or is this an opportunity perhaps to raise that in conjunction with this project, incorporate that into the parking area, and find a new home for the vets services? This isn't something that you need to decide on tonight, but it's probably something you want to think about and decide pretty soon, as it kind of relates to the planning of that space, if it's going to be something different. Talked to Gary Elliott about possibly moving, and he's got ideas on some things that work and some things that don't work for him as far as the flow of traffic that he has. So, if we do want to contemplate removing that building, we would find him a home for his services that meet his needs. So, we would have at least a year to figure that out. So that's not as eminent as maybe the decision on whether that building is savable or not. So I'll let Mr. Hagberg kind of address some of the concerns that he has for your contemplation.
Yeah, so basically, and I know it's been brought to public safety, I believe, from Gary Elliott. For a number of years, we seem to have this issue with this odor in the building. We've used our own equipment to try to detect what that is, or what the source might be. We've been unsuccessful. We did bring in an outside contractor. The only thing we've been able to determine is that we know it's not methane gas. No one can really pinpoint just what's causing it. It kind of comes and goes sometimes, but to try to make sure that we're doing the best we can with the building we have installed some years back, we installed a heat recovery ventilator. And basically that's just, it's taking fresh air in from the outside, and then it goes through a heat exchanger, and because it's porting the same amount of stale inside air outside that it's bringing in. And it kind of tries to save cooling during the summer and exchange heat during the winter, just to make sure that we're not using any more energy than we have to. Generally, I have that in the document. Generally, you'll run them. We've got one downstairs for the basement offices. Generally, they'll run 20 minutes of venting air and bringing air in, then they run 40 minutes either totally off, or they just keep recirculating indoor air. At the vet's building, that thing is porting air out and bringing fresh air in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It never stops. We've done the same thing with the furnace. It pulls in as much outside air as it can, and the fan runs continuously just to make sure we're bringing as much fresh air into that building as we can. And obviously that increases some of the utility costs there, because then even when the building's not in use, it's, we're still just heating or dehumidifying that air. And because of the age of the building, it's had for sure one addition onto it. Well, what happened there is the ductwork system is kind of inadequate, because some of it is actually running under a slab, and some of that has started to collapse a little bit. So basically, for a small, I don't know, I should have put the square footage in here. It's not that large of a building, but we basically have in order to keep it comfortable in there, we have a 120,000 BTU furnace that sometimes during the winter, because we can't get adequate ducting in there, it'll run nonstop, just trying to maintain that temperature in there. And then, I don't know if you remember back, I know there's a lot of reports these months just kind of fly by, but it would have been it would have been a year this past Christmas Eve, the day before Christmas Eve, I believe. We had a ground fault between the maintenance garage and the veterans services. The electrical service comes into my building first and then over to the veterans building. We had that ground fault. We had Crier Electric in last summer. We did get some new service wire from my building to the veterans building, but then it goes underground again. And so we just basically there's new service wire to a pole box on the outside of the building. But technically that should be changed. We should, you know, get new service wire so we're not spliced like that into the old. Totally safe, but, and then it also only has 100 amp service going into the building. And right now they're, again, it's maxed out. We've got a few circuits over there already double tapped on the breakers. And so if we're going to keep the building in service, then, you know, we probably should put some money into it and kind of upgrade. So, and again, you know, I'm open to whatever county board decides, but if you know, if we did think there was a different use or other you know, areas to house veteran services that might be better for them.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We'll certainly have it on the agenda again so we can discuss more things here. At the Oasis building here, they look down there. Is there anything available down there?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
So historically, one of my friends that ran that particular building for a long time said, never get rid of that. And I asked him why. And he said, you know, I don't want that department to become part of social services. You know, those are our veterans. They did kudos for us. And he was very adamant about that. And I guess now I am too. So I don't know if we have to spend money on that particular building, but we certainly have to give the Veterans Department a separate autonomous building. I think that's really, really important. You know, we can't just say, oh, it's going to go away and we'll absorb it someplace because it's only 2 employees, 2.5 employees. I think we have to say, you know, this is important. Those people want to come and, you know, they offer so many different services that I can't even imagine. And they don't need to be judged by what door they go into. So I would like to make sure that wherever we put them, if it's not in that building, they are autonomous. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I think it's very important that if we can, I like the building only because I know some of the veterans don't want to change, but I want to make things better for them. Mr. Schuman.
Yeah, and I was just, what would the budget impact be on that, Tom? I suppose we have to start looking at that at some point too, right? To tear down and removal of that building and.
Well, and we do pay, you know, to heat a building for 2 employees and, you know, the maintenance on that building for 2 employees. You know, that was part of the thought. And I appreciate Mr. Olson bringing up, you know, the veterans that are served by that, because I think there are some ADA compliance issues in that building too. Isn't there like a step into one of the offices or?
The door's not wide enough for something that I really informed by Mr. Elliott.
Yeah, so there are concerns, but in talking with Mr. Elliott, I mean, there are specific things that he would be looking for in another space as far as, you know, the clientele and some of them having, you know, ADA issues, compliance issues, or, you know, meeting those requirements. So yeah, I mean, it is high in our minds, and it's not an idea of trying to stuff them somewhere else. It is trying to meet their needs, but it is an opportunity. If you want to do something with that building, I think now's the time to take a look at it.
Yeah. Thank you. Other comments? Hearing none, the future agenda items, well, obviously the building project is going to be on there, and the Veteran Center should be on there also, I believe, for next month. Anybody else have anything that should be on there? Correspondence, reports, conferences, and other meetings or other matters for discussion only. I have one comment. We spent a lot of time on the airport stuff, but to me, the airport stuff is very important. There's a lot of it that's quite detailed, and it takes a lot of time to get through that. We just got done with the contract for Hayward Aviation, and that took 11 months to get done. And I'm proud to say it took 11 months to get done because I think we did a good job with that. That being said, meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thank everyone for participating.